Welcome all to the Adapting the Customer Experience webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We're looking hopefully at a very interesting conversation. We have an amazing panel of 6 people, all with very different experiences, which really should cover most of hopefully what you guys are trying to looking to learn from this webinar. We do have 6 speakers, so we're going to have to watch the clock very closely. I would also highlight that the event is being recorded and will be shared with you after the event, which from a positive perspective is if we do run over by a few minutes, you will have the recording of the event anyway, in case you're unable to stay for the extra few minutes. The approach we're going to take to this webinar is we're going to start with a very high level macro view from each of the panelists based on their areas of expertise, and then we'll delve into some more specific questions pertaining to some of the key sort of things we're seeing come out of the pandemic. Please also take the opportunity to ask any specific questions yourselves through the control panel. We are looking to set up a closed group after the event, which will allow the panelists to cover off any unanswered questions that come out of this webinar, and also any additional questions that you may have after this. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how we're going to run it. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panelist today, James Easterbrook. So James leads the strategy and customer practice at Morehouse Consulting. He comes with more than 20 years experience in customer transformation and has worked across many sectors and worked with organizations such as BP, NHS, Google, etc. James, welcome to the webinar. If you don't mind, it'd be lovely to understand from yourself a bit about the key changes you've seen from a consultant perspective and the clients around sort of customer behavior and expectations following this COVID situation.
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep, and morning, everyone. So I suppose it's sort of the first and most controversial point is, have things fundamentally changed, or actually have we seen really more of an acceleration? And I think you could argue that if you look at things like the shift to online grocery, the reduction in flying, automation, these were trends that were already happening but have been accelerated through the pandemic. I think what's most interesting for us and what we've seen with clients is who was ready for that, who was planning ahead, who had things in place. And even some of the most sort of digitally aware and savvy organizations were caught short. And where they assumed that their models were easily scalable, they weren't, and it didn't work. And I think all of us probably have had first-hand experience, looking at online grocery, trying to get a delivery slot, where we've seen that, in the stock outs, we've seen that come to the fore. I think the other thing we've seen is a real sort of paradox of expectation. So people are, get me the stuff I want, get me it quickly, and get me it without having to go to a store. And by the way, manage the whole process seamlessly. But that's something that actually really only well-funded, quite sophisticated, well-experienced firms with a good e-commerce setup can do. But we're actually expecting that from everybody now. That's just a baseline table stakes. And a further paradox, I guess, is that whilst we've all been taking advantage of those global e-commerce supply chains and platforms, we're also craving this personal, local, emotional connection, which is a strange sort of two things to go together. And I think, tellingly, if you take food retail as the example again, the winners have been the multi-billion-pound supermarkets and online platforms at one end, and then the local greengrocer or the local butchers at the other end. And I think that dichotomy is interesting, and people in the middle have suffered. I think we talk about accelerations, but in reality, there have been new needs, right? There have been new things coming, and there's a good recent report by the World Advertising Research Council that looks at consumers in a number of countries, and they highlighted a shift in the primacy of safety and security in what people want from the businesses they deal with. And that suggests that there's some new expectations coming at the base of the hierarchy of needs for customer expectation. And, I suppose that drive for safety and security is sort of understandable given the situation and what we've been going through, but perhaps less predictable. They also saw in that research a desire for brands that champion independence and freedom. And I think, I'm not a psychologist, but that desire to tap into the sort of agitation around lockdown and cabin fever makes sense and will need to be brought through in the types of services and experiences that are on offer. And I suppose a final point is, the way that customers have changed because they had to. Things that seemed sort of intractable previously, they just aren't anymore. And I think we've seen many organisations that are trying to drive channel shift. The pandemic's actually been, despite all the trauma and the difficulties, it's been great. I mean, it's offered a lot of advantages for people trying to drive that shift. I mean, in our own experience, we did a lot of work with the NHS, and a lot of that's been around driving uptake of remote consultation for things like GPs and consultants, and that's been an incredibly long, slow burn, very, very painful process over a long period of time. The pandemic comes along, and then we're shortcutting 2 to 3 weeks later, and it's up and running. And I think that's been particularly interesting, that kind of radical readiness for change that wasn't there before, or willingness to accept models and new situations, that I think definitely something we've seen that's been really interesting.
Really, really useful, James. Thanks very much for that overview there. And we'll dig a bit deeper when we talk to more specific questions as well. Next, we'd like to introduce Julie from the panel. Julie leads client relationships at NRG, well respected as a contact center specialist in the UK. She founded and led the Contact Center Partnership, and she's got many years of experience of judging for many industry award programs as well. Welcome, Julie. From your perspective, what are the general trends that you're seeing come across in your discussions with the contact centres?
It's been quite timely actually for me, as I've just gone through the judging process for the North East Contact Centre Awards, and we've seen some fantastic examples of digital acceleration during the last few months. I think that, you know, that we've accelerated in about 10 years, and some of the programs that would have taken about 18 months to have installed, people have done within days and weeks. I think for me, the biggest shift that I'm starting to see is the relationship between customers and calling into contact centres, and that customers are looking for more integrity, and the relationship is completely shifted now. And the way that contact centres have reacted is very much more proactive to reach out to their customers and show that integrity and show the empathy. So the contact centres have really had a difficult time in shifting that balance, as well as the challenges we all know of getting everybody home and social distancing and technology problems of people's bandwidth and broadband. So I think they have really risen to the challenge, and the digital acceleration has just been phenomenal in the last few months. What we've seen, it's tested even the most robust of business continuity plans. Some were, as James mentioned, some were set up for it, a lot weren't. But I think as we're emerging from it, it's a much stronger industry now, and the relationship with the customer is never been more important than it is right now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And I guess when we talk a bit about the case studies you'll talk about a bit later, we can dive a bit deeper into that. So thank you very much for that. Next, we'd like to introduce Raji. Raji heads marketing, branding, and corporate communications at FirstSource, one of the leaders in outsourcing and business process management services. Raji, I guess from your perspective, you have more of a view from a B2B perspective. Again, what are the key changes that you see in your B2B customer relationships as a result of the pandemic? Raji, I think you're on mute.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sandeep, and thanks for having me as this panel. It's great and exciting to see some friendly faces as well in the panel discussion. Just put in perspective, right? It's been about 9 months into the pandemic, and this is something the likes of it that we've never seen before. I think the last one was in 1980. So no amount of BCP, which B2B organizations are usually prepared for, could have ever made any assumptions to prepare for this, because you would normally do a BCP, would expect one part of geography to get impacted, and you would move your business to offer seamless services to your customer. But this was just not that. It was an extremely different and difficult situation. But I believe that the B2B organizations that actually won and ended up maybe strengthening their relationship because of the COVID were the ones who had already put in a lot of effort and time and invested in building strong, enduring customer relationships. Your relationship with your customers actually really get defined only when you are facing challenges. For most organizations, it's actually an opportunity because you get to earn your customers' trust. They understand that if you're able to, if they're able to rely on you in situations like this, then you're a true partner. So when the COVID pandemic hit, I mean, like most of the other organizations, our agility and adaptability were put to test. But you have to commend how people rise to the occasion, right? I mean, you saw 23,000 plus first sources completely get energized. There's just amazing amount of camaraderie and collaboration that we've never seen before, because we've never had this kind of a challenge. And we got together and, business transitions were made. We understood that a lot of our customers were handling really sensitive end customer requirement. So we had to move quickly, and within a fairly short period of time, we were able to get our customers all possible service. I mean, we got them work from office, work from home, and everything in between. The short answer to this is, I think we emerged stronger. The relationship emerged stronger because it was put to test, and it came out as a strong, enduring relationship. So a COVID kind of a challenge in a B2B relationship, and any brand for that matter, usually defines itself in tough situations. So I'm happy to say that for us, we were able to navigate this really well and ended up having much stronger relationship with our customers.
Yeah, it's a story you hear quite a lot about people learning new ways of doing things through the pandemic that will help them in the future as well. So that's a really good thought process. Thanks for that, Rajiv. Next, I'd like to introduce Sean. Sean is Senior Vice President for TTEC's Engage Operations for the EMEA region. He comes with over 30 years experience of leading customer experience teams, both in captive and BPO organizations. TTEC itself is a leading global customer experience technology and services company. Welcome, Sean, to the panel as well, and welcome today. Lovely to hear from you about what you have seen as a major impact on customer service or customer experience delivery as a result of the COVID pandemic.
Thanks, Sandeep, and morning, everybody. Great to be with you today. Like Raji just said, TTEC, it's been a crazy year for ourselves, right? Having dealt with COVID and having gone through this, and the impact that it's had on the company. If you think about TTEC as an organization, we have 50,000 employees across the world. Pre-COVID, we had approximately 4,000 people already working from home. So when COVID hit and we went into lockdown, we found ourselves with the unprecedented challenge of having to logistically move 46,000 employees to a work from home environment. And we did that within 2 weeks. Incredible logistical effort, not without its problems, might I say, not without its challenges. If you think of the logistics of getting kit from a contact center office environment into somebody's home environment, and then trying to figure out, okay, what's the broadband environment like, etc., and all the issues that went with that. But we went through that, and certainly, thinking about that logistical effort. You then add further complexity to that, in that TTEC, we support multiple industries. And if you think of COVID's impact across industries, for example, two big industries that we support, travel and retail. Travel was absolutely decimated overnight. Volumes dropped off a cliff. Similarly with retail, the online retailers did very good, but traditional retailers, they were struggling. So we've seen some of our traditional contact center volumes drop overnight, and therefore we had people who were effectively available to support other clients. But we also then seen industries that were growing exponentially. Government welfare benefits, healthcare services, financial services, where people had to contact their banks, their mortgage providers, etc., and ask for holiday payments. So again, the complexity was added in that. We then find ourselves having to reskill and redeploy people from the likes of travel, from the likes of retail, into government, into healthcare, into financial services, etc., and going through the reskilling process that went through that. So absolutely unprecedented challenges. And like Raji said in First Source, TTEC, we stood up to that, right? Our people absolutely were front and center, embraced all the issues, and delivered exceptional customer experiences to our clients. Very recently, and the interesting thing when you look across industries, as we say, some industries have been decimated by this, But those companies that have embraced digital customer experiences, T-Tech, we just reported our Q3 results and the period ending September, and year to date we're up 24% than the previous year, because we've seen the demand from our clients that they say, hey, you know, we need digital services, you guys have the platform that can deliver that, and therefore the ability to do that for our clients, you know, has been front and center. So it's been unprecedented times, Sandeep, but thankfully, I wouldn't say we're through it yet, but we're at least now coping with it and living with it from a business perspective.
Really interesting. Thank you much for that, Sean, and we'll talk a bit more about the technology trends a bit later on as well in the further section. Next, I'd like to introduce more from a technology perspective, Kartik. So Kartik is the Chief Business Officer at Haptik. It's probably one of the world's largest conversational AI companies. So Kartik, look, welcome to the panel. And again, as a tech organization, giving a slightly different perspective, I mean, how did Haptik particularly adapt to the challenge of COVID, both for itself internally and for its clients as well?
Thanks, Sandeep, for having me on the panel, and hi, everyone. Yeah, so it was also, again, fairly interesting for us as a company. Conversational AI, chatbot, in scenarios like these where customer experience becomes extremely important, the relevance of technologies like conversational AI and chatbot is obviously very high. So at Haptik, what we were always had the policy where everybody at Haptik could work remotely for 2 days in a week. So from that perspective, we were fairly set to be able to work remote. So for us, it was just like flipping a switch, and day-to-day work just happened because we were very much set up to do that. From a business perspective, yes, when the pandemic hit, we did get a lot of inbound requests for customers trying to figure out, hey, how do I really manage to keep up my customer experience as my volumes are increasing, and I don't have people to be able to handle those kind of queries. That's where our bots came into play. A lot of the frequent questions which users typically used to ask because of the pandemic, we quickly trained the bots on those particular topics. For example, hey, is your store open? Or what's the refund policy now that my flight is cancelled? These are very new form of queries that we were seeing, which the bots could start addressing right away. What we also did was our AI models at the onset of the pandemic just picked up these new terms around coronavirus, COVID, and because we saw that the kind of queries were increasing, we created a very simple coronavirus bot, which any of our enterprise customers could just deploy it on their existing bots, which was answering a lot of the FAQs, a lot of do's and don'ts, and thus addressing a lot of these queries, which would have typically hit their contact centers. So yeah, that's what we as a company did. And obviously, as time passed, there's a bunch of interesting things we did to make sure that the customer experience is not hampered for our customers.
No, wonderful. And when we speak later, it'd be good to understand a bit more about the sort of more new technologies that organizations are particularly requesting at the moment. So thank you for that, Kartik. Final panelist for today, from an overview perspective, is Hannah. Hannah co-founded the Matrix Group, helping companies to deliver omni-channel strategies, improve customer journeys, and sort of focus on sales and distribution. More importantly, you may have heard of Hannah through the whole sort of Captain Tom phenomenon. So as part of that, it led obviously to about 39 million being raised for the NHS and the subsequent creation of the Captain Tom Foundation. Incredible story, probably one of the most heartwarming stories of the year. I'm really pleased, Hannah, for you to join us today. I guess from the perspective of today and what we're covering off today, it'd be really interesting to understand from yourself a bit about that experience and how that has perhaps changed your view of the world and customers more generally.
Thank you, Sandeep, and hello to everybody. Well, it's hard to explain the last 8 months if I'm truthfully honest about it all. When lockdown hit, we were just about 2 weeks into the pandemic. And so already we were being impacted as a business. So our business is 13 years old. We have employees, responsibilities. So as lockdown happened, we too were sitting and thinking, what is the depth and breadth of this? How will it affect us? How will it affect our employees? How will it affect our family? And my father lives with us, and all the other things that everyone else was worrying about. So simply when we suggested that we could raise £1,000 to support the Covid-19 appeal in the NHS, we did that genuinely because we thought we could touch people with a little bit of joy and happiness, and that £1,000 would make a profound difference. And my background is sales distribution, marketing, omni-channel, international. My husband, a chartered accountant by trade, but has worked for a big brand and put businesses onto the stock market. So we had a clue, right, in terms of understanding how business operates in the customer journey and understanding how those relationships work. However, nothing could prepare anyone for 1.5 million emails within 10 days, for the world's media to be outside your gates, outside every boundary within 3 days, to go from what we thought would be a joyful, happy, positive, a local story, talking about the centenarian who'd, has a very positive outlook, into a global phenomena within about 4 days. So nothing could prepare anyone. I think no business could be prepared for that, and no people could be prepared for that. But what we were able to do was use our skills as business owners and operators and understanding customer journey to almost shore up the fact that the world was watching, because actually the world became our customer, and that's the way we viewed it. That that we knew that my father's voice was touching humanity. People from 163 countries donated to that original £38.9 million in 3.5 weeks. So when you are talking to the world, you have a responsibility, right? You have a responsibility to talk back and to let everybody know that we hear them, we hear their call, and that we want to support them back. So it was a real two-way communication. But within days, we were operating on a global scale, and we never forgot, and still don't, that the end result is people. What my father did was break down boundary across gender, race, social status, age, gender. There were no boundaries. And when you talk about that from a customer relationship perspective, that's simply outstanding, isn't it? It's everything that we want to achieve. So what we've taken from this whole experience is that we can be globally connected, and we can do it. There's so much more that we have in common than not, that there are so many similarities between us that there might be local differences, but in fact we're all talking the same language, because those people around the world who he became front page on every newspaper in every continent, that wasn't actually about the NHS. It was about humanity touching humanity. It was about positivity and courage and connection, and that is the piece that we should all remember when we're thinking about our customer relationships, right? That in the end, what connects us is much greater than what separates us. And if someone who's 100 can show us that there are no boundaries, the boundaries are only ones we create. They don't actually exist. And in our relationships with our customers, you have to think about what connects us more than separates us. And I think that was a massive learning for us in our own business as well, because our clients, their needs changed. So within all of this, within the fact that we are still talking to the world, that we operate about 10 interviews a week, we say no to a lot more than we say yes to, that within that time we set up the Captain Tom Foundation. We put trustees around the board, we got our vision, our mission, our causes. We're talking to government here, government elsewhere, the United Nations, the WHO. We're managing relationships beyond your wildest dreams. But ultimately, we have customers in Matrix, and they're my absolute priority. And their needs changed, and we had to adapt to those changing needs. And we were able to do so because we already had a workforce who could work from home. So for me, working from home, no boundaries, do it. It's just about the technology standing up to it, right? But this is much more about allowing our people to be, to operate on a level to be as good as they can be, as supported by us, but also listening to our customers and listening to what they need from us and being agile enough to change in order to adapt to their changing needs. So our 8 months has been one entirely about adaptation, and by being agile and also listening and learning to what the customer's needs were, whether that was people in Argentina, people in Delhi, people in Australia, people in America, people anywhere in Europe, or my customers here in Heathrow. The listening part is the part that matters. And I think that's mostly the message that we would give. We have to listen to learn, not to respond. We have to listen to what is required from us and react accordingly. And I think that's probably our greatest learning.
Absolutely wonderful, amazing story. And I think there's probably a book out there for customer experience off the back of that as well at some stage. So thank you very much for that, Hannah. And thank you all, by the way, for the introductions. We'll delve a little bit deeper now into some of the themes we outlined as part of the event itself and the topics we cover off. One of the major ones we said we'd cover off is more sort of focused now around the key impacts of COVID-19 for the relationship both with local and international customers. James, I thought I'd bring you in first to get your perspective from your consultancy perspective, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So I think very much aligned with Hannah's points there and Hannah's thoughts there. I think one of the biggest things we've seen is that need to get much better at understanding customer needs and then figuring out what the response needs to be. I mean, we've certainly seen a massive increase in the hunger for customer insight. And I use that term advisedly because, yes, there is an ask for more data, but it's really not just about that. It's about the data plus the quality and how that data is interpreted and then used to drive action and change. And there's always been a lot of focus on give me the machine that can give me answers without saying, well, actually, what questions should you be asking? And I think, what should I be doing with the answers and putting that through? So that's been a big feature that we've seen. And I think a great example I've seen in this space is Dixon's car phone. I think, really able to understand that consumers that were looking for consumer electrical products still wanted the kind of reassurance of human advice that was there before, right? They were going into store previously because they wanted someone to help them through it. There's no shortage of ratings and reviews. I mean, millions of ratings and reviews on every single product out there online that they could have got. But Dixon's car phone did a really good job of understanding that they weren't just buyer of consumer technology. They were buyers of consumer technology with specific beliefs and concerns that they needed satisfying. And I think they immediately set up a video service where you could speak to someone in a store who could take you through the products. Now, obviously, that replicates a lot of the material that's already out there, but they understood that that's what their audience needed. And I think that was really important to see that application of the understanding of what their customers had and the ability to respond very quickly was a really good example. I think also, related to that, there's been a change, obviously, in how customer processes are designed and managed. We've all lived through that, and there's so much more to come, for sure. And I think we're now moving out of the sort of make, do, and mend, let's get through it stage, and we're now going to see more focus and more investment in how customers are reached and served. And that's going to mean very different things for different organizations. And I think, sort of distinction we've seen is that you've got some organizations who are seeing humans as a sort of unacceptable business risk, right? They've got to strive towards automation to deal with that. You've got other organizations who've seen the opposite. They've seen the innate value in the human input and the human presence. So they're going to focus on making sure that they're, bringing through the right talent pipeline. They're going to invest in that way. And I think there's a third group, which is sort of looking at how they invest to amplify the potential of the humans they've got through technology. So taking the view that tech plus human beats tech or human any day. And I think that's probably one of the most interesting areas, is that sharper definition of the role for humans and the role for technology, rather than just, well, there's a new piece of tech, we'll get that. People are beginning to look at that more harshly. I think there's probably also a trend we've seen, which is around questioning who it is that should hold the relationship with the customer. So if you look at consumer goods, for example, if your only channel to market is through retail and that's closed, then going direct to consumer makes absolute sense, which people were toying around with previously, but you've seen a sort of explosion in that. Huge growth in direct to consumer services from players like Unilever and Pepsi, building those services out or having them in place, but then massively investing and putting support behind them. In another industry, look at the movie industry. The route to market for new titles through either their own platforms or streaming services, as opposed to cinemas. And in both cases, that requires a fundamentally new approach to the customer operating model, but also the underpinning technology that goes with that. And I think that thinking about what are the customer processes, how do we need to run them, what's required, that has been really significant for me and what we've seen.
No, really good. Thank you for that, James. And I think it's that personal touch that's coming out again, and humanizing tech to some degree, which popped out there, as well as looking some of the new routes to market. Raj, it'd be good to get your perspective again here as well, focusing particularly on your B2B customer services or customer relationships again, and how they've been changing over this time.
Sure, this time I remember to unmute myself. Yeah, absolutely. I think the important B2B is a little bit different, because it's a little bit more nuanced, and it's a little bit more complex. Our expectations are set by our experiences as consumers. So I think the most prudent way to look at it would be look at it as business to human instead of B2B or B2C. And I hear a couple of the other panelists echoing the same thing. But at the heart of any experience is a relationship, and it is built in different ways in the B2B world, where it's multifaceted. You definitely take some learnings from the B2C industry about understanding the customer as a whole, as a person who has challenges, goals, good days, bad days, and is working towards something, and not just look at it as a non-human entity, which is what happens when you look at it as B2B. Your immediate perception is B2B is less human than a B2C is. But I completely believe that there's nothing that replaces great interpersonal relationship. So what is really clear and what we see emerging is that companies that win in the moments that matter are those that would completely obsessed about their customers, absolutely customer centric. And you usually do it through 4 or 5 ways. One is to really deeply and have a very fundamental understanding of the client's business, the client's goals, the client's strategic directions. A constant effort from your end to reduce cost and effort for the customer, making interactions easy, removing all kind of friction to ensure that you have a really great dialogue and conversation with your customers, making the interactions really simple. Meeting and exceeding expectations, what is set by the customer. I know that we talk about it a whole lot, but when you actually sit down and look at your customer relationship, when you look at all the things that you could do, one of them is going beyond the SLAs, because that's what makes you truly memorable. The other is primarily focus on trust building, and nurturing relationship, building very strong, empathetic, personal relationship across stakeholders, because B2B is not just one customer. You are usually talking to multiple people in an organization who have completely different objectives in terms of what they are looking for from the relationship. And of course, there is this proactive issue of management. Make issues go away before they even get registered. So some of these, I think, really defines your relationship, and what defines it, and like I spoke about it earlier, in moments like now, in moments like COVID, in fact, in moments which were 5 months or 6 months earlier, when the relationship or when the world was a little bit more complex, we seem to have somehow understood what the world works like now, and we are all accepting whatever the new normal is. But to actually be there for your customers and to know that you're a reliable, trusted partner, because it's the moments like that that defines the relationship, cements it, strengthens it, and builds a really, really enduring, relationship between you and the business. So I'm all for a very person-centric, human-centric relationship. I think in B2B especially, it's really, really important that you connect with your customers at a human level and ensure that the experience that you give them is the same as they would expect from anybody, whether it's a B2C. You cannot say that it's a B2B, so we talk to a group of people and not to individuals. your experience, your customer experience has to be crafted to each of those individuals that you interact with on a daily basis to manage the relationship.
No, that's really important. I think, I guess, given customers are struggling right now anyway, I guess a lot of them are looking for learnings from organizations like yourself that you're seeing with other customers you work with. So it's getting that outside corporate sort of view from someone like yourself that they work with, which I think becomes really important. Thank you very much for that. We talked a bit in the topics about this new normal and what the new normal means. I think it's become an overused phrase, which I'm sure most of you probably agree with. But I guess the question we ask is, what does that mean for customer relationships? So what does the new normal mean? Has something changed long term, or is it just while we get a vaccine through the door? So good to explore that a bit more. James, do you have a perspective from your side first, particularly in terms of, has it changed customer relationships for good, or whether it's a short-term change?
Yeah, it's a classic answer of yes and no, I think, is how I'd say. So I think, I mean, our expectations have definitely been reset, right? There's things we will and won't accept, and that's definitely changed, and there's been big shifts there. I mean, I think one of the things I reflected on in this is that we're definitely seeing customers put a much sharper lens on what businesses are actually there to do, so their purpose and how it fits with them and their lives. And I think, any major event like the pandemic or the 2008 crash, it sorts the wheat from the chaff, right? Any business that's got a clear, single-minded proposition that's well aligned to customer needs, you're going to do okay. And those that don't, they suffer. And this morning, brilliant example with Arcadia. Those brands, Dorothy Perkins, Topshop, etc. I mean, customers lost a sense of what they were there for and how they fitted in their lives some time ago. And arguably, they were surviving because they had scale and presence. But when the chips are down and you get an event like this, customers weren't prepared to give them the time and the attention and the trade, and you see them fall. And I think the other thing I definitely reflected on with this is that any crisis exposes the gap between what your stated purpose is and what you say you're there to do, and then the reality of the customer experience. So if you set your stall out as a business as, we're an understanding partner, we're there to support you, we help you, we get you, and then you don't do that, then you're really going to suffer. And I mean, Hiscox probably provides the best example for me recently. We're all about the small business, we understand small business, we're there for you as a small business. Then people not getting their pandemic business continuity insurance paid out, and Hiscox saying, oh yeah, well, there was a clause in here that you missed. I mean, clearly as a brand, you can't do that. You can't promise one thing and then have the experience be so different. But then, to sort of go back to the yes and no, on the flip side, humans have short memories. We'd definitely see, I think, a regression to the mean in some areas, and behaviour will go back to normal. But I think things will just have shifted on a bit further. So I think, things like those direct relationships, the direct to consumer, that will be permanent shift, right? That will definitely be there. People will want more control and connection. But I do think things will settle, and we will see some of those behaviours come back for sure.
Yeah, it's human nature, isn't it? That it goes on for a while. You sort of hit back. Hannah, great to get your views on what James has said, and anything additional that perhaps you'd like to add.
Well, I think from a business perspective, we're very much resonate with the things that Raji is saying in terms of B2B, because after all, we are a B2B business. And the relationships the reason why we have the client base we do is because we have personal relationship. And I have never left the relationship of any one of our clients. And yes, you can say that if we quadrupled in size, would that still be the case? Perhaps it wouldn't be. But where we are today is that I am able to touch every single client, and every single client of ours matters, and they know that they matter to us. And in fact, what we've had to do to survive is adapt to our customers' needs, as I talked about. And it's that agility and adaptability that has allowed us to stay alive. And the thing that's also been a side impact, which is, I think, extremely positive. I sit on the Silverstone Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, something that's very close to my heart. And a lot of what we do within Matrix is talk and manage C-suites, executive teams, looking at, mostly in cases of their lack of diversity, their lack of representation, their lack of inclusion, and how that absolutely and fundamentally holds them back as businesses if you do not represent the population or your customers. You know, there's so many times there will be boards making decisions about their customers, but no one on the board representative of who their customer is. I mean, it's a crackers situation. But what this has done with our clients is they are rethinking what their workforces look like. So they've furloughed, or they haven't furloughed, but mostly they furloughed. So, and their businesses have changed. So what does their new workforce look like? And it certainly, in many cases, does not look like it looked 8 months ago. So this is a really big opportunity to put your workforce back together in the way that it supports your future growth. And what an opportunity to reflect diversity, to reflect the representation that's required. And a couple of our big clients are sitting there saying, yes, you're absolutely right. What do we need to do? So from our perspective, I have to be honest, I see a glimmer of hope for change that I didn't, well, I saw it before, I never lost hope, but I thought it was going to take a lot longer. What we're seeing with some of these big clients is that they are saying, yes, we want to use this opportunity to challenge our workforce status quo and to look at some of those skills gaps that we now have, because the workforce does not look the same. So what skill do we have and what skill do we need? Where can we upskill and where are the gaps? And who are we going to fill the gaps with? Who's out there in our pool that perhaps would have been overlooked in the past that we can now bring in? So from our perspective, that cultural realignment, that looking at workforces, aligning to what your new sales strategies are, it's super fascinating and actually just a little bit hopeful.
No, really good. And I think, as you rightly pointed out, that personal touch has come up lots of times during the sort of debate today and the conversation today. This element about challenging current business models, as we need to, certainly something organizations are looking at right now. They need to become more efficient, I guess, in terms of what they do today, as well as change or sort of cater to a sort of consumer. It'd be interesting later on when Karthik speaks as well about how technology can support some of those changes. So thank you very much for that, Hannah and James. Next, I guess, Julie, I want to come to you, talking a bit about you know, customer expectations, how they've changed, but looking at a couple of examples. And I know you had a couple of examples of organisations you're working with around NHS and Sage. It'd be lovely to hear a bit from you on that, if that's okay. Hi, Julie, you're on mute, just so you know.
That must be the biggest phrase of this year, you're on mute. So yeah, we've had a couple of really interesting examples, and just to pick out a couple, as you mentioned with Sage and NHS BSA. So firstly, NHS BSA, they are the arm's length organisation of the NHS. So I guess that you could kind of describe them as the outsourcer to the NHS. So they, on a normal day, they provide about 19 different services to the NHS, such as e-HIC cards, the prescription fraud lines, all of those type of services they support the NHS with. And during the pandemic, obviously e-HIC card customer lines kind of died off. Nobody's travelling, so they weren't trying to get the European health cards, and they weren't chasing debt with their prescriptions, and they transformed their services and very quickly ramped up within 12 hours the 111 COVID helpline. They supported that with. They set up a second contact centre solution using AWS software. They also have ran the COVID helplines for the likes of the PPE distribution, where all of the care homes were trying to get their PPE sorted, so they were the responders trying to distribute that. They've done many different lines that they've set up to support, and they've deployed some of their existing staff from services that weren't as buoyant or in greater demand, and transformed their people and retrained them onto different products and service lines. They've done a phenomenal job during the pandemic, not only supporting communities, but being the backbone for the NHS, I guess. They've done GP helplines, and more recently they've set up the COVID education helplines when all the universities were going through crisis, the students coming back and what to do with their students. And they've just set up the vaccination helpline ready for when the government roll out the mass vaccination. So they were historically what you would see as a typical contact centre, and they've had to rapidly deploy technology, send people home as everybody else has. But their innovation hasn't stopped during this time, and they've implemented new email software, new telephony platform during that time. So the customer came first, and they were still delivering their SLAs, but they continued to innovate throughout that time. The second example that I've come across recently, which was quite phenomenal, Sage UK are the technology providers that do payroll and software systems. So during March, April, it's their busiest trading period with payroll year end. And during that time, obviously, we went into lockdown. So faced with the challenge of sending the 800 workforce home, sounds small in comparison to, as Sean mentioned, 46,000 getting home. But they, you know, within a matter of days, they had all of their workforce home, which was their peak trading period. But also they were fundamental to their clients to make sure that they continue to deliver to their clients on all the job retention scheme updates. So there was daily changes to that, and they had the responsibility to keep their customers up to date. So they didn't operate in their normal business model waiting, you know, for customers to call in or for them to call out. They completely transformed how they communicate those changes to customers by setting up webinars and delivered many pieces of change within a short space of time. Their CSAT scores went through the roof. You know, they delivered extra revenue because the customers believed they had gone above and beyond the call of duty. So the customer loyalty, in effect, came as a result of that. But they also continued, there was no disruption to the customers. Their performance metrics were still achieved, but they also did a really good job of keeping their colleagues connected as well throughout that. So their employee engagement scores weren't affected. They're still working from home now, and they've used technology in a way to engage with their colleagues, to have a bit of fun, make sure that their well-being is still you know, protected, but they're also still supporting communities. So that is just a couple of examples of brilliant how a couple of companies have really reacted well throughout the pandemic, and their customer loyalty as a result of it has gone through the roof. And yeah, hats off to those that managed that.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. You hear so many stories over this time about organisations and their firefighting, and because they're firefighting, they're not able to implement the changes they need to do because people are on furlough, they're working from home. But as you pointed out, if you want to deliver that customer service, now is the time where you've got to invest at the same time as well. I think it's those organisations that are doing that during this time that probably will succeed better than others, really, isn't it? Really good. Thank you for that. Just focusing now on contact centres specifically, and the impact of COVID-19 on that. I think, Julie, we're going to bring you in again on that one, given your vast experience in that area, and particularly how contact centres more generally have adapted in the UK. And then, Sean, it'd be lovely to bring you in and get your thoughts on that as well. Julie, do you mind kicking off and just generally giving a view on how you've seen contact centres in the UK having adapted to COVID?
Yeah, of course. I think, you know, the way that they're handling the customer experience is now changed. As Hannah was mentioning, it's a real opportunity that we have now. So not only are they have transformed and are delivering their customer experience in a different way and probably in a more proactive way, but we need to reset what the customer wanted pre-COVID and how a customer expected to be to communicate with the business have completely changed now. So as I said before, it used to be around personalization. It's now where the priority is around integrity, but integrity goes further than just the honesty of their interaction with the contact center, but is also about how a business operates in the community, how they deal with their suppliers, how they treat their employees. So I think they're under the microscope a lot more now, the contact centres, and where I think previously they possibly were seen as the poor relation of an organisation, but where many of retail and hospitality and they've had to furlough their frontline staff, the contact centres have remained working, whether it's in home or it's in their contact centre with social distancing in mind, and they've very much become the front line and are now starting to. I think that the boards are starting to realise that the true customer insight and data that the front line in a contact centre can gather, and how important that is right now for this opportunity to reset the customer experience, how we handle our customers, and what the customer expects, but also to reset the employee experience as well, because that is also different to what it was pre-COVID. The employee experience, people have had a sense of flexible working now. They can see that they can work from home. So I think it's not just around how the customer experience has changed, but also how the employee experience changed, which is, as we all know, the two are very interlinked. Happy customers are happy employees, and vice versa. It's the circle. So I think it's a really, really big opportunity, and I'm seeing that within the contact centres, that they're looking at the whole holistic overview of the customer and the employee.
No, thank you for that, Julie. Really helpful, and sort of follows up with what you said earlier on as well. Sean, really, it would be great to hear a bit about your thoughts on what Julie said, and also perhaps on some of the how contact centers have been able to adapt given the remote environment we're working under now as well.
Yeah, I agree actually with everything that Julie said. It's I guess that circle of happy customers, happy employees, driving the employee engagement. Yeah, one of the things that we'd seen, particularly as we moved significant volumes of people to a remote environment and working from home, and we've seen this with our clients, was that historically our clients, the typical model when you thought about remote working, remote training, was that in a classroom environment, clients would come to us with a PowerPoint and say, this is our training content, we want you to deliver this PowerPoint for us. Yeah? And in the outsourcing world, we knew that it was dependent on us to have high quality trainers that could take that content that the customer was typically very precious about and saying, hey, we don't want this changed. This is what we need you to deliver. But with a skilled trainer, you could engage people in a classroom and you could get them to where they needed to be in terms of understanding the products, the services, driving customer service, etc. But when you move that to a remote environment, suddenly the game changes. Taking PowerPoint and trying to deliver it via Zoom just really doesn't work, right? When you have 10 or 15 people remote at home trying to engage, they joined a new company, they're trying to understand the product, the clients, the services, etc. Trying to do that via PowerPoint and Zoom really doesn't work. And we've been through that pain this year, and I guess the education process of trying to take our clients on that journey. And fortunately, T-Tech, we already had a consultancy arm in our business. We had developed a proprietary technology that we call Real Play technology that allowed us to drive automated learning, introduce scenario-based learning in a remote environment using technology and tools, and really introducing gamified learning as well, so that individuals who are new to a company, who are learning about the company, its products, its services, its customers, etc. There was an element of competition and engagement. We had to do simple things like we had to change the trainer's workstation, to give them better webcams, better microphones, dual screen working, etc. So that on one screen they could see the content that they were delivering, and on the second screen they could see the dashboards and the engagement and the real-time feedback in terms of how individuals in that classroom were performing. So a whole host of technology solutions that we've had to bring to bear, to make sure that we drive that employee engagement. Because again, coming back to what Julie said, if we can get the agents at the front line engaged and feeling that, hey, they're making an impact, they're delivering exceptional customer experiences, that results in happy customers, and it becomes self-fulfilling.
Really good, Sean, and I think that's a nice segment into probably our final section for today, which is all around technology. And absolutely want to bring Kartik in here. I guess, Kartik, from your perspective, I guess Haptik have focused on a few innovative technologies or found certain technologies that are working better during this environment. I know you were going to talk a bit about WhatsApp and perhaps IVR, etc. as well. It'd be lovely to get your feel of the sort of technologies that you're finding customers are finding useful, helpful, and any sort of innovations that you've been working on during this period as well.
Yeah, so obviously the biggest challenge companies face right now is how do you offer great customer experience at scale, right? And that's where AI technologies like conversational AI chatbots come into play, particularly in a time like this where your end users are trying to reach to you via multiple mechanisms. Being available for them across multiple channels becomes extremely important, right? Nobody wants to call the call center and keep waiting to connect to a human agent, which is why customers always try multiple mechanisms like email and chat and so on. Conversational AI as a technology can obviously live on all of these channels and start addressing queries across all of them. And one interesting trend which we saw during this pandemic was the usage of WhatsApp, and how businesses are adopting WhatsApp as one of their primary channels to interact with their end consumers. We all know WhatsApp usage is through the roof, 1.5 billion users as per the last count. And even WhatsApp as a company is rolling out a lot of interesting features for businesses to manage conversations with their customers. We've seen a lot of scenarios where businesses have now made WhatsApp number as their primary customer support channel. If you have a question, just write to us on WhatsApp, and either automated AI technology or human agents could respond back to those queries. And what this does is basically allows businesses to have multiple conversations going on at the same time without blocking their customer support agents who can handle only one person at a time on call. So that's one. You can obviously, as a business, send out notifications. So if you have any change in your policy, or if you have any announcement that you wish to make, you can always engage with those users by sending out notifications on WhatsApp. And a lot of interesting applications we are also seeing where businesses have launched storefronts or commerce applications on top of WhatsApp. Two examples I'd like to showcase here. One is JioMart. JioMart is Reliance's foray into retail by offering everything on JioMart.com. So you can actually now place orders for your groceries just by chatting on WhatsApp, and the engine kind of actually understands what are the items the user has asked for. It creates a cart and then enables the end-to-end transaction in a messaging first channel.
And Kartik, just for the audience, just to sort of explain Reliance and the scope of Reliance would be quite useful.
Oh, sure. So Reliance is one of India's largest conglomerates. Just recently they raised a ton of money from Facebook, Google as well. So Reliance as a whole is a huge conglomerate, and they have Jio as the telecom business, within which JioMart has been launched as a direct competition to Amazon in the grocery space. So that's what Reliance does, and they are using WhatsApp as one primary way to engage with their customers. Just quickly, a second example I would like to share is what the government of India did when the pandemic was just beginning to kind of take speed and there was a lot of confusion on what's really going on, they created the official COVID-19 help desk on WhatsApp. So users could just send a message to that number and get any of their queries resolved. So queries around, hey, what are the common do's and don'ts? What are the common myths? Where is the nearby health center I can go to in case I feel I have symptoms? All of these questions the bot was able to answer. And such is the power of WhatsApp that within the first 24 hours of this number being rolled out, there were close to about 1 million users who had already chatted on the particular WhatsApp number. And obviously the service kind of became popular. The Prime Minister of India tweeted about it. Mark Zuckerberg himself posted about it in a Facebook post. And then it just blew through the roof. And in about a month's time, when the pandemic had hit its peak, we had about 35 million users interacting with that particular bot and getting their queries resolved. So you can imagine what a technology like this could do even for your business, for you to scale your entire customer experience initiatives.
That's an amazing thing to be part of as well, actually, to see it rolled out in such a extensive way. So that's absolutely an amazing story there. Just on IVRs, is there anything you perhaps could provide a view on IVRs as well?
Yeah, sure. So the conversational AI technology, once the AI engine is trained to answer those queries, it can go on multiple channels: WhatsApp, chat, email, and IVR as well. So these days, bots can actually answer calls for the queries it has been trained on by integrating with the IVR system. So instead of a user having to press multiple buttons and connect to the right agent or get their query resolved, a user can just say, "Hi, is your store open and what are your timings?" The engine can actually process this input, and then if it's trained for that query, it can automatically respond back in natural language without having that call being diverted to a customer support agent.
No, wonderful. And I think that's where I guess a lot of time and money has been spent to try and improve those engines over the last sort of 6 months or so. So thank you very much. Sean, it'd be great to bring you in. I know you were talking about technology probably 5 minutes ago. Any thoughts on what Karthik said and the sort of technologies he's talking about, plus anything additional you're seeing in the space that you work in?
Yeah, I'm like what Karthik had said in terms of the conversational bots, etc. We've seen that in our own business, but it goes much wider than that, right? We've used a number of technologies, and actually I can think of a recent example where we had a client, a UK retail client came to us relatively recently, probably 3 months ago. They were struggling with volumes post-COVID. They had an online offering and the volumes were off the scale and they were struggling to get on top of that. And they came to us with basically a query saying, hey, we need 200 people, but we need them in 2 weeks. If we don't get this solution within 2 weeks, we're going to struggle to really get on top of this volume. Now, for us in the outsourcing world, typically when a new client comes to us, it's at least 3 months to deliver a new client. Right? And this client had come to us, it had been a brand that we had done some work for in other parts of the world, but we wanted to launch this client in the UK. So we rose to the challenge, and by doing that, what we actually did is we introduced, number one, a recruitment bot. So we automated the online recruitment process so that no humans necessarily needed to be involved. It was online testing, online applications, etc. But the other complexity was that the client wanted us, because we didn't have available kit, i.e. laptops, desktops that we could ship, the client was okay for us to use a bring your own device policy so that the agent would have their own laptop, desktop, whatever it was. And therefore, what we also introduced there was a technology testing bot. So rather than having humans say, okay, let's check your PC or your laptop, let's see that it meets the specification of our client, we automated that entire process. So between a recruitment bot and a technology testing bot, we were able to recruit 200 people within 2 weeks. Right, with very little human interaction, and get those people ready to enter training within 2 weeks. And again, in an environment where that typically can take 3 months or longer, that was an incredible use of technology. number one, it satisfied the client's, short-term demand. But number two, it put TTEC in a position where this was a brand that we wanted to expand with in the UK, and by the use of technology, we were able to do that.
Amazing. I think that's exactly the power of technology, and I think thank you very much for that. I know we're a few minutes over. Hopefully that's okay for everyone. As I said, the session is being recorded, so for those of those that dropped off, we will share the recording to them anyway. I'd like to thank all of you very much for your insights. I know it was a bit rushed. I think the nuggets that you gave were amazing, and I think the recording will probably be quite helpful because we had to go through it in such a fast period of time. But the only other thing I would say to the audience is thank you very much for joining us. I hope you got a lot out of this. We will share the video with you. We also create a little group, as I mentioned at the outset. So if there are any questions, I know we didn't get to a few today because we ran out of time. If there are any additional ones as well, we'll put them on that group, and we'll allow you to connect with the panelists directly to answer any further questions you may have. Hopefully that was a good time, good use of your time this morning. So thank you very much for joining us, and panelists, again, thank you very, very much for your expert opinions.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.